New Thought Media Network proudly presents the 2025 season for Nonviolence Meditation Series, January 31st through April 4th. Embrace nonviolence every day with our 64 unique video meditations. Join us at 6 a.m. Mountain Time or watch anytime on our YouTube channel. Featuring a collection of New Thought voices, the 2025 season for Nonviolence Meditation Series. Only on New Thought Media Network, January 31st through April 4th.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here, and you are here too with me. And we're going to talk about the inclusive church. What does that mean? And how can you be doing things in your community that help you be as inclusive as you want to be? I was going to say more inclusive, but you may be already being very inclusive. And these conversations and these tips and tools just help you continue to maintain that. Today, I am really excited because I get to hang out with Reverend Sunshine Daye. And there are so many things that we could talk about related to being inclusive in our church and spiritual communities. But before I bring her forward, I just want to remind you of the two things that I remind everybody else of, including myself, at the top of every show. I use inclusive church on purpose. Sometimes people say, why don't you say inclusive ministries or inclusive spiritual communities? Well, I'm reclaiming the word church for a connection to the people, not the property. That the church really is, as we were reminded during the pandemic, it's not the building that makes the church, it's the people who make the church. And so it is a purposeful decision that regardless of the format, whether the people are coming together to learn, teach, practice, or explore spiritual community, whether it's online, whether it is in a local community center, whether it is in people's homes, that is what really makes a church a church. And then the second thing is you'll hear me referring to leaders in churches or leaders in spiritual communities. And I'm not only talking about ministers. I am talking about, and we will be thinking about, everyone who provides a leadership function. They may be leading a volunteer team. They may be teaching a class. They may be giving money. They may be serving on your board, but they are helping. They are the leaders who make your church community grow. So those two caveats, let's shift to today's conversation with Reverend Sunshine Daye. 3 random things about Sunshine Daye. The name Sunshine is an apt description of how she shows up She is so often the sunshine in the room, even when she is like backstage, being a stage manager. Somehow she takes care of all the details and exudes sunshine at the same time. Random fact number 2, Sunshine Daye is at least bilingual, and that may come up in our conversation today. I know that she speaks both English and Spanish, and she may tell me she speaks 5 other languages that I don't even know about. And random fact about Sunshine Daye number 3. It's an easy one. She lives in Southern California. So welcome, Sunshine Daye.
Thanks for that great introduction, Tracy. Hello, beloved.
So I love to do like 3 random facts because, I can read the bio and it's an interesting bio, but it's kind of boring just to read it. And so I always try to pull like 3 random facts or 3 random things I know about someone. And then I invite you. What else do you want people to know about you, Reverend Sunshine Daye?
Thanks, Tracy. I'm a lover of people. I love having fun. One of my internal mottos are, if it ain't fun, it ain't worth it. And so I seek to experience the joy in random and in as many situations as possible. I think that's why you've experienced me being backstage as a stage manager, bringing sunshine and bringing joy to situations. As a kid, I played stickball in the middle of the street in the Bronx. I would sit down next to someone who was sitting on the curb, downtrodden, and have conversation. I've always been interested in the lives of people. I would ride the subways of New York on my way to high school and imagine what their life would be like and what their life was like. And sometimes I would even engage what people might call strangers in conversations as a high school student, just to see if what I had imagined about them was correct or not, based on what they were wearing, how they looked. So staying curious is definitely part of my character. Imagining what life is like for other people is also true for me.
I'm laughing because I'm imagining a teenager, Sunshine Daye, on the subways in New York and the stories that you could make up, but then the courage to actually engage with people and they would talk to you.
Yeah, a lot of fun. And for me, I think that as I look at my life and life as ministry, my life as a leader and life is as ministry, it's definitely not only bringing joy, but allowing people to simply be and having them feel heard and seen and recognized, and that people have value, that there are no throwaway people. We live in a society today that unless you have A, B, and C and you're at the top, people don't notice you. And I like engaging with everyday people and making sure that they feel seen and heard and valued. One of the best compliments someone ever gave me was that I make people feel like they're the only ones in the room because I'm paying attention. And for me, my attention is what I can give to people, that I'm not really giving it to them. I'm naturally curious and interested in the engagement. So ministry for me has been a lot of that. It's come from wanting to serve what people call underserved populations, populations that are seen sometimes as disposable, whether it's people experiencing homelessness, HIV and AIDS. I did 20 years in HIV/AIDS emotional support and feeding people and just being present as people made transition. Those kind of things are important for me. And it's been a part of my ministry because so many folks are overlooked, and I see them. I see them. I don't see everybody, but I see a lot of people, and it's a fulfilling feeling to be able to engage with people and to have them walk away knowing that they've been seen and or heard, or not having anything and no experience at all, just kind of walking away going, that was cool, you know.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why, even though I wouldn't have said it that way, as I'm listening to you, I'm like, that's one of the reasons why you are able to be inclusive as a leader. And part of it is because that really is, it's what you're hardwired for it, not just personality, but you're hardwired for this. I'm curious about who you are. I want to know your story. It's not got anything to do with mine. Like, you don't have to be like me. And so knowing that you are a model for, or an example around being inclusive of many, many different kinds of people or groups, it's like, oh yeah, that's why. That's why. It's not something you had to study and learn. So, and you've been in all different kinds of ministry roles as well.
Yeah, and to that point as well, I didn't have to study it, and yet in essence, it was a study. And what I mean by that is simply that part of my story is that I got involved at a young age in drugs and alcohol. So I know firsthand as well what it's like to be discarded or to seen as second class or throwaway or what a waste. And that feeling of being disposable, I know I use that word often, but I think it really hits the point. The feeling or the sense or even the thought that I am disposable and that if I were to disappear, nobody would care. That was a feeling within me, and also a thought that really saddened me and really took me to a place of, is this how I really want to live? And I know the pain of that thought. I know the pain of that feeling. I know the pain of that experience. And it's not a worthwhile pain. And if I have anything to do with it, I don't want anyone to ever experience that firsthand. Like, take it from me. It's not fun. And so for me, I think that has also been information because I've lived it firsthand as well.
I'm just taking all that in. So you're also an example of someone who has done ministry in a lot of different ways with a lot of different groups. So yes. I know that about your background, but share a little bit about that, because I think it will influence, or it will help people understand some of the things we will be talking about.
Yeah, so I am an ordained minister with Centers for Spiritual Living. And before becoming like an official minister per se, my ministry was HIV/AIDS prevention and education, to where I actually was out on the streets of South Central Los Angeles in some of the projects, talking to people about how they can care for themselves and how they had value and that they were worth it, and having discussion and conversations, even around safer sex practices, sharing syringes, how they could prevent becoming infected with HIV and AIDS. And I did that for about 20 years. And for me, that was ministry. It was ministry to talk with people about their loved ones who were living with HIV and AIDS, and that they couldn't get it by sharing a fork and things of that nature. And as I began to get deeper and deeper, what happened for me was it expanded, and my ministry then moved to how people are oppressed based on their social identities, whether it's their race or their age or their gender or their orientation. And then my ministry shifted to a practice of inclusion. How do we actually benefit from having people at the table? How do we actually benefit from having variety and difference? And that was, again, unofficial ministry, but for me, it was my passion. It was where I lit up, and probably like I'm lit up right now. And then from there, it went to a spiritual nature. Of course, I got sober 38 years ago. And as I grew spiritually, and as my SQ, as I like to call it, my spiritual quotient, as I began to recognize this power, this presence, this life that is living in, through, and as me, my ministry expanded to spiritual practices, in particular, being minister at Seaside Center for Spiritual Living under Christian Sorensen, Dr. Christian Sorensen, who said, come here and be here. All of my training was with, Dr. Michael Beckwith and the likes of him. And then I got my own center in the city of Downey. And it was there in the city of Downey that things really shifted, because it's kind of like, this is my baby. This is my own thing. And with the help of a great board and practitioners and people who were coming, all of a sudden, like Spanish ministry started, and I started teaching in Spanish. And Spanish is my first language, though I speak English because I learned in school. All of a sudden, speaking about spirit and infinite intelligence and the plenitude, speaking about these things in Spanish and studying science of mind philosophy in Spanish and being with Spanish-speaking practitioners and students enlivened me. It gave me like this whole new life and this whole new vocabulary that I didn't have before. So being involved in regions where this philosophy is being taught throughout the world, but particularly in Spanish, really thrilled me. And then, of course, that event called COVID-19, which shut us down for a long time, really derailed things. And in that blessing of being able to stop and slow down, emerging from that has been my current ministry, which is providing loving support and spiritual tools to people in recovery. Because when I ask myself as a minister or as a spiritual leader, who's seeking God, who's seeking spirit, who wants this relationship with this infinite power and intelligence, it dawned on me that there are thousands and thousands of people who are in recovery, who are seeking a higher power, who are seeking a relationship with a higher power. And because I speak both languages, I speak the language of the heart, which is known sometimes as 12-step language or recovery language, and I speak science of mind language, and I speak English and Spanish. This was just like a natural fit. And this is where my ministry has expanded to of most recent. And I'm just having a blast doing what I get to do.
Yes, yes, and yes. And, it's funny because when I was speaking earlier and I said, well, I know of 2 languages, and she might tell me of 5 more, but I hadn't thought about it. Really is the language in recovery communities. It's, it's a language in itself, in the communication, in the description of what's happening. And then, yes, of course, the language of science of mind. It too is a language of its own.
Yes.
So because you cross over so many would be boundaries for others, let's focus in for a minute just on what you primarily are doing now, because I think it's really helpful for people if we talk a little bit about how do you market? How do you decide who to market to? How do you market to people? And how do you know your marketing is reaching different kinds of people rather than just, maybe the people who are exactly like you or like the norm? So I don't know. Let's talk a little bit about marketing and being effective in your marketing, but at the same time being conscious and aware of being inclusive.
Marketing will tell you or guide you into picking a niche and an avatar. And by that, they simply mean like, who is the person, the exact person? What do they look like? How much money do they make? Where do they live? What's their philosophy? What size are they? Like, be specific. If you were talking to one person who is your ideal client, who might that be? And though my inclusive mind was like, no, I don't want to just, and then what happens to all these other people? So it seemed like the wrong thing to do. And yet it was exactly what I needed to do, because the idea is really, as I'm speaking to possibly what I'm imagining as this one person, that one person has so much in common with so many other people. And because we are one, because in our philosophy and our way of life, we know our oneness. As I've had people in audiences come up to me and say, I wish I was an alcoholic so I can do your program. And I'm like, you don't have to be in order to simply live the benefits of this teaching and this philosophy. But that is a prime example as to how having that one person, like when I look into the camera and I'm talking to you, right? Like having that one person actually is including others, because those thoughts, those feelings, those experiences are not exclusively with that person of that specific demographics. It goes across the board. People know pain, people know sadness, people know certain things. And so as I am a little more targeted with who I think I'm talking to, that person actually connects with so many people who are of a different race, a different age, a different gender and orientation and, philosophy from who I thought I was speaking to. And it's like, wow, this really does work, because what happens is my messaging is more specific because I think I'm talking to this one person. And the messaging that right where you are, spirit is, right where you are is the infinite intelligence that we are, each of us are the unique, unrepeatable, magnificent, powerful, beautiful way that spirit shows up in human form, that there's nothing that separates us from life, and life is God or higher power. Like the messaging, it's the message. And so when I speak it to who I imagine I'm speaking it to, my avatar, that niche, that person I'm supposed to be marketing, it falls upon receptive ears, people who want to hear that, people who want to know that truth and experience it for themselves. So even though it seems like it's being exclusive, going through that practice, what I found is that my message is more inclusive, and that I'm also able, it's not just drugs and alcohol, but the other week I posted something like, besides drugs and alcohol, what is a soft addiction? What are you addicted to? Because it may not be drugs or alcohol, but wow, how many folks are just like on this thing, addicted to scrolling and how many likes or food as an addiction. It's those, I know Michael Beckwith coined this, but I say this all the time. How many of us have weapons of mass distraction, those things that keep us from living our best life? And if we can learn how to go, whoa, this is distracting me from me knowing the truth of who I am, me living my best life. How do I get to lay down these weapons of mass distraction and actually know the truth of who I am, and then radiate that? And, to me, like, that's the joy. You get me started on stuff like that, and that is inclusive. It doesn't exclude anyone. And the moment that we think that it does, it derails stuff. But it's quite inclusive. It's available to each and every one of us.
So what you just did, as you were walking and talking your way through that, it was one of the best descriptions that I've heard ever. I was thinking in a long time, but ever, about the distinction between oneness and sameness. So even though you didn't use that language, right, that the whole idea of both of us, like if I'm speaking to the one niche, the one avatar, the one, if I'm speaking to that person, that they are going to match or the message will magnetically attract everyone who is in that same vibrational space. Mm-hmm. And they don't have to be the same. So if I'm clear and I'm really targeting that person so I can connect deeply to the way that spirit or God is showing up in them. And if I'm successful at that, that vibrational energy is going to go out, just reach out and grab anybody else who needs that same message, who's operating at that same vibration, who is dealing with the same kinds of circumstances. And so I love that, because you know this, but you know this, that we still have a lot of people who say, well, we shouldn't be talking about diversity because we're not different from one another. We teach oneness. We do teach oneness. We do not teach sameness. And the way I'm going to be going back and pulling out that little section. So when people are like, I don't get it. We're all the same. And I'm going to be like, watch this little snippet from Sunday Day.
I'm happy to be your poster child for that. Thank you.
So does that, or how does that also apply? How does it apply differently in person or virtually? I'm thinking about listeners or viewers who may say, well, I don't know how that would work for me. And, this one viewer might be in a meeting in person in a city, and somebody else may be actually, their ministry is 99% virtual and online. So does it apply the same? Are there little nuances?
There's always nuances and always, slight shifts and changes to how I speak, where I speak, who I'm actually speaking with. The messaging is still the same. There may be a slight way in how I might say things a little bit differently when I'm speaking with maybe someone who is dealing with alcoholism, or compared to someone who has a weapon of mass distraction that looks like shopping. However, it's still the same language. It's that obsession. It's that distraction. It's that thing that just keeps me away from actually focusing in on myself. The other thing is that for me, my ministry is I record a weekly show, and we put out a weekly meditation, but I also put on events. My newest love, besides pickleball, but that's a whole nother talk show, pickleball as a spiritual practice, is facilitating sound bath meditations and sound bath therapy, and using sound, crystal bowls, gongs, rain sticks, using sound to help just in essence, a good distraction, distract us from the thoughts, all of that stuff, when we actually allow the vibration and the energetic of sound to really take us into those moments where we can just be. And so I do those live, and the people that come to me, even then, are not necessarily people who would consider themselves alcoholic or drug addicts, or even people that have soft addiction. But again, it's about our spiritual practices that remind us of the truth of who we are. So for that, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I get to do my YouTube ministry, and that I get to do my in-person ministry, and that I get to reach people to be that reminder. A lot of times it's really that I get to be that reminder, and I get to facilitate their spiritual practice and show them and guide them along the way. I make every effort to move ego out of the way, because it's not about me, but it's about that person discovering that indwelling power and presence within them that is the solution to all of their living problems and situations. And it doesn't have to look like my idea of life, of God, of higher power, of spirit. And so it's quite individual, but it's also quite collective, that this aspect of spirit is what speaks to this person, while this aspect of spirit is what speaks to me. And this, and this aspect of spirit speaks to someone else. I know that it's all one, just various aspects of this all powerful, all present life that is God. And they have the space to discover that for themselves. So it doesn't have to look like what I think God is. It gets to be that spirit and power of their own understanding for the time being. As I know, my idea of spirit has expanded and grown. God hasn't grown. God has been the same. I just am able to take in more and more of this infinite intelligence. This is like, oh, I only had this little piece, and now I have this much more. So it's my own expansion. And I can't wait to even see through these practices and through being a facilitator of people's growth and expansion, how that also changes for me as well.
I'm thinking about pickleball as a spiritual practice. And I'm sitting here thinking about, now, how do I get that to be part of the inclusive church? And then I laughed inside, because I've had to ask myself that question many times about roller skating as a spiritual practice. And how can I weave that into a show on the inclusive church? And I haven't figured that one out yet either.
I have. I have. And I know how you have too, but you may not have pinpointed it that way. When you talk about roller skating, when you roller skate, even though you might be in your own realm and world, and you might not necessarily be paying attention to other people, there is an energy that flows from you, and people know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you roller skate, that you love this, that this is part of your practice. It's part of your self-care. It's part of your joy. And so I don't know. I think people have probably approached you, but people approach me. When I'm playing pickleball, when I'm playing poker, when I'm, I'm at the beach, people are like, what is this joy? Ricky Byers-Beckwith talks about it all the time. Like, whatever it is that we do it with this great joy, because it brings us joy. And that is spirit. That is spirit speaking so loudly by me being obedient to having and experiencing joy in, through, and as my life. That is spirit announcing itself like, hey, this is life here. And, if people have said, yo, you were into it, you were da-da-da, or they approach you about it, it's because your spiritual practice is speaking so loudly it's like, wow, people go, wow, I want to live like that.
Right. It doesn't need words.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't have you on the inclusive church without asking you about theory and maybe your own experience, because you do speak both English and Spanish, and you have supported a number of individuals and communities where they have either had the primary group of Spanish speakers, but there needs to be some connection to the English speaking or the curriculum that's in English, or communities that were predominantly English speaking, but they wanted to serve the Spanish speaking group of people. So for viewers of the show, do you have any like key lessons learned about being inclusive in mixed language communities, or any tips that come to mind for communities that are predominantly English speaking that want to serve or grow their Spanish speaking membership or guests?
Yeah. A wise woman, once asked, like, why are we so blank? It could be white or male or female. Like, why are we so just this one thing, homogenous? Why are we so English speaking only when we have surrounding us, other languages and people who speak Spanish and other languages? So the idea is, how do I make this place welcoming to someone who speaks Spanish as their first language or their only language? How do I play music that will then speak to someone? How do I advertise that these particular musicians, or that this particular talk is going to be done in Spanish, or that I have translation services? I once took a risk as a co-chair of an event to have someone speak in only Spanish without translation. And they said it backfired, but I think it provided the best lesson, because here is someone speaking in Spanish and you don't understand a daggone thing. Imagine that these are the people that are wanting to come to your center, your communities, your churches, and they don't understand. So how do I include them? One of the things I learned early on, Michael Beckwith, at least in one of his services, has a sign language interpreter, so that those in the hard of hearing or the deaf community get the message. Does it cost money? Yeah. And if you want them, and why do you want them? Is it just for ego, or is your message the message of, you are welcomed here? I want you here. I want to know about who you are. So it goes back to like me being on the subways,
Right.
I want to know who's in this surrounding community, who's here. And I want you to know that this is a safe place. If you need a safe place, like, this is what we do and this is who we are. Not, I see you as numbers, and so if you come, it's going to mean more money in my collection plate, as much as I'm genuinely interested and I want to know you.
Yeah, that added piece of, yes, I want you here. I want you to know you're welcome here, but I want to learn more about people who are different from me, because it makes me better. It makes me more effective in the world. It allows me to see a broader face of God, right? So your being here is not just to serve my ego, to say, oh, we've increased our Spanish-speaking congregants by 50% in the last year or the last 2 years. It's not just that. It's, oh, let me tell you 5 things I've learned from engaging with people whose primary language is Spanish that I never thought about before.
Right.
because their experience is different from my own. Or I have, so you're right. So it's also about, I'm going to be in the practice. Being inclusive is not about, as you said, it's not about feeding my ego or making, quote unquote, the church look good. It really is, if my mission is to spread the gospel, mission is to spread this teaching in new thought to as many people as possible who will find it useful in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I need to reach out to and engage with and learn from people who are having a different life experience than my own.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And at first, it can come from a place of curiosity, and let it and allow it to grow to a place of I'm interested, because we can all be curious, like Mrs. Kravitz, like, oh, being nosy and curious. I wonder. Allow that to grow into, like, I am genuinely interested in you. I'm genuinely interested in how we can be together and what we can create together. Yeah.
Yeah. So anything else that comes to mind? And I mean, that was great, but I also realized I kind of interjected, and you might have been in the flow of a couple of other examples.
Who knows? It's all perfect. One thing that comes to mind though is this cute sign that I saw one time. It said CH and then blank blank CH. So your show is Inclusive Church. So what's missing? You are. So I was like, oh, like, what's missing in our church? What's missing in church? You are. If you just have CH, blank, blank, CH, what's missing? You are. And when we have that perspective that we're not complete until you're here, mm-hmm. Like that's also a message. Like, what's missing? You're missing. I noticed that you weren't here. Is everything okay? Or, I noticed we don't have this community or this kind of representation. I want, like, what's missing? You are, and you are, and you are. So it really is looking, we could be happy with who shows up, and it may be enough. And yet having that, like, who's missing, who's not here. Yeah. That is part of our radius and our community and the people within our reach.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the only thing, or the main thing that I don't like about doing the show is that when I have a guest, right, there's never enough time. And so our time is winding down pretty rapidly. So I'm just going to ask you a very broad question to see if anything or what comes to mind. Something will come to mind, knowing you, but what comes to mind? And that is just the broad umbrella. So if I say, what are 2 or 3 things that you wish everybody would know? What are 2 or 3 things that you wish everyone would remember or know in order to have an inclusive church or an inclusive spiritual community? What 1 or 2 things come to mind that you can share?
I hear in my neighborhood a guy who honks the horn, who sells elotes, and I get annoyed by that. And so it's interesting to remember, and even as I'm having my own experience, is to remember that that's part of this community, and that which I find annoying, when I lean into it and get curious about it and I get to know who that guy is, instead of going out there and yelling, stop honking, which I have done in the past, admittedly. When I go over and I go, hi, I live here, I'm Sunshine, what's your name? And how long have you been doing this? And really begin to get curious and interested. So I think humanity has a tendency to be afraid of what's different or who's different. And for me, as that young child riding the subways, staying curious and having the courage, meaning having the fear, but doing it anyway, of asking and engaging in a conversation to know someone else or to get to know a community or to show up somewhere. How can I be of service? That those are the things and the practices of inclusion. Yeah, especially the things that annoy me, because my annoyance is where for me, where spirit is like, that's me over there honking the horn. That's me over there doing such and such. That's me. And I'm reminded of our oneness as a practice. And so I don't understand. I don't get it why these people do such and such and such. Do you want to? Have you asked? Have you engaged in conversation? And then when I find out, I feel so silly, like, I didn't know. And it's okay. I'm gentle with myself. And this is like, oh, well, now I know. And now my heart is filled with compassion and love and understanding.
Yeah, I was thinking about, as you were describing, it's like, yeah, that horn, it irritates me. And why didn't he go somewhere else? Go run another block. But then if you talk to him and you find out that, you know, this is the way he feeds his family, and he has, you know, a little girl that's 10 years old and is, you know, number one in her class, getting straight A's, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, we care about some of the same things, or oh, this is a legal way to support his family, and I want his family to have food and a place to live. And how great is that? How he's hustling for money, right? In a healthy, meaningful, legal way.
Legal way, yeah.
And so, yeah, when we don't know, I think one of the things you just reminded me of is pay attention to what annoys me. Pay attention to what annoys me so that I can ask myself, why am I annoyed? Mm-hmm. And am I making up a story about that person? Right? Am I being a victim to them? Or am I more likely, am I making them a villain?
Yeah.
Because they are doing something I don't like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's really helpful. And we're out of time. Which I guess means that you'll just have to come back in a few months and we'll talk about some other aspect of being inclusive.
That would be awesome. And I would be thrilled to do that with you, Tracy Brown.
Thank you so much, Sunshine.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
And everybody else, just please join us again next Tuesday at noon Mountain Time for the Inclusive Church. And in the meantime, between shows, you can visit us at stainedglassspirit.net or in the .net for the website, or just go to Stained Glass Spirit on Facebook and check out. We post inspirational quotations and links to articles and all kinds of things to encourage you to be inclusive in your spiritual community. Again, my name is Tracy Brown, and I'll see you again real soon.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.